Let me ask you something. Do you know what your child is doing on their phone right now? Most parents would say yes. They've got parental controls. They've had the talk. They trust their kid. But here's what most parents don't know. The platforms their children use, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, have known for years, in extraordinary detail, exactly how predators use their systems to target children. They've had internal research, internal reports, internal warnings, and in many cases, they didn't fix it. That is now the subject of major legal action in Australia, and the outcomes of those cases could change the way social media companies operate, not just here, but around the world. Today, we're breaking down what's actually happening, what the platforms knew, and what Australia is doing about it. To understand why this matters so much right now, you need to know a bit of background. Online child sexual exploitation, grooming, abuse, and the distribution of child abuse material has grown dramatically over the past decade. Tracking almost perfectly with the rise of smartphones and social media, the Australian Federal Police's online Child Safety Unit is one of the busiest it has ever been. In the last financial year, Australian law enforcement received more than 30,000 reports of online child sexual exploitation material. That is not a niche problem. That is a crisis. But the conversation is shifting. For a long time, the focus was almost entirely on catching individual offenders. And that work continues, and it matters. But increasingly, Australian legal experts, regulators and courts are asking a harder question. What responsibility do the platforms themselves bear? Because grooming doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens on apps. Apps that have recommendation algorithms. Apps that connect strangers. Apps that, in some cases, were designed in ways that made children easier to find and harder to protect. Here's where it gets really damning. Over the past 2 years, a series of legal proceedings and investigative reports in Australia and overseas have revealed internal documents from major social media companies showing that these platforms knew in considerable detail how their systems were being used to exploit children. Meta, which owns Instagram and Facebook, faced litigation in the United States, where internal research showed the company was aware that Instagram's recommendation algorithm was connecting adult men with accounts belonging to minors in ways that facilitated grooming. The algorithm, designed to maximize engagement, was essentially doing the work of finding vulnerable children for predators. In Australia, class action litigation is now building against multiple platforms. Legal firms are compiling cases from families whose children were groomed, abused, or had images of their abuse distributed through these platforms. The legal argument being developed, and this is significant, is not just that individual bad actors use these platforms, it's that the platforms themselves were negligently designed, that they breached a duty of care to the children using their services. This is a profound shift in how the law is being asked to think about platform responsibility, and Australian courts, backed by a regulatory environment that is more aggressive than most, are increasingly receptive to it. In December 2025, Australia passed the Online Safety Amendment, the law banning social media for under 16s, and we covered that on this channel a few months ago. But that law is just one piece of a much bigger picture. E-Safety Commissioner Julie Inman-Grant has been one of the most aggressive regulators in the world when it comes to holding platforms accountable. Under her leadership, E-Safety has issued legal notices to platforms demanding the removal of child sexual abuse material, pursued platforms that failed to comply, and published transparency reports that name and shame companies for their inadequate responses. In early 2026, E-Safety reported that it had issued more than 1,400 removal notices to platforms for child sexual abuse material in the previous 12 months, and that compliance rates, while improving, were still far from acceptable. Some platforms were taking days or weeks to remove material that should be taken down within hours. The government has also significantly increased funding for the Australian Federal Police's online child safety work and has introduced mandatory reporting requirements that compel platforms to report known child abuse material to authorities. Failure to comply can result in substantial fines. Now let's talk about what's actually happening in the courts, because this is where things are getting genuinely historic. Australian law in 2026 is beginning to apply principles that, if they hold, will fundamentally change what platforms are legally required to do. The key concept is negligent design. The argument goes like this. A platform that knows its recommendation algorithm connects adult predators with children and fails to fix that algorithm is not a neutral intermediary. It is an organization that has created a foreseeable risk of harm and failed to take reasonable steps to prevent it. That sounds in negligence. And if it sounds in negligence, the platform can be held liable for the harm that results. This is the same doctrinal shift that happened with tobacco companies, from "we're just selling a legal product" to "you knew it caused cancer, and you kept selling it anyway." It took decades in that case. The online child safety litigation is moving much faster. Legal firm Coffles, which has been at the forefront of institutional abuse law in Australia, published an analysis in early 2026, noting that litigation in this space is becoming more collective and systemic. Group proceedings involving multiple families, alongside expert evidence about organisational culture and safeguarding systems. The question being asked in these cases is not just what an individual predator did, it's what the platform knew, when they knew it, and what they chose to do or not do with that knowledge. What does all of this mean for parents right now? First, the legal and regulatory pressure on platforms is real and growing. The combination of e-safety enforcement, class action litigation, and the under-16 social media ban means platforms operating in Australia face more accountability than almost anywhere else in the world. That doesn't mean the problem is solved, but it does mean the environment is changing. Second, the under-16 ban, whatever its enforcement challenges, has done something important. It has shifted the legal and moral frame. It has established in Australian law that platforms have a responsibility to protect children, that they cannot simply disclaim liability by pointing to terms of service that nobody reads. Third, parental awareness matters enormously. The most effective safeguard for any child is still an informed parent who has open conversations about online safety, who knows what platforms their child is using, and who creates an environment where a child feels safe to report something that makes them uncomfortable. The platforms are not going to protect your child for you. That has been made abundantly clear. The law is slowly making them do better, but slowly is the key word. In the meantime, the protection starts at home. Here's the bigger picture. Australia is in the middle of a genuine reckoning about what kind of digital environment we want for our children. The social media ban was part of that. The platform litigation is part of that. The e-safety enforcement is part of that. And underneath all of it is a question that every parent, every educator, and every policymaker needs to sit with. How did we allow the digital spaces, where our children spent hours every day, to become so poorly regulated for so long that a crisis of this scale was able to develop? The answer is complicated. It involves the extraordinary speed of technological change. It involves the way platform companies used their size and their lobbying power to resist regulation. It involves a genuine failure of imagination, a collective inability to anticipate what the internet would become and what it would do to childhood. Australia is not going to fix all of that overnight, but it is trying harder than most countries. And the outcomes of the legal cases, working their way through Australian courts, right now, could set precedents that echo around the world. The apps grooming our kids are not beyond accountability. They just haven't been held accountable yet. That is starting to change. I want to hear from you on this one. Are you a parent? Have you had conversations with your kids about online safety? Have you or someone you know been affected by online grooming or exploitation? Drop it in the comments. This is a conversation that needs more voices in it, not fewer. Like and subscribe for more Australian news explained simply. See you next time.